Welcome back, everybody, to Day 8 of the North Americans World Championship for Hearthstone. My name is Frode. I'm joined by That's Admirable on the desk, and we have our second match of the day coming up, which is Nias versus Muzzy. Two dark horses, but not so dark to you, Admirable. You've been seeing these guys journey for a long time, including Muzzy, who you say is one of your picks to potentially go pretty far.
Yeah, Nias, I've been watching him all week. I think he's a pretty solid player. And Muzzy, of course, I had the pleasure of watching this guy all HPL. 15 matches of him. Had a rocky start in there, but had a great turnaround and found himself in the top 8.
How do you feel like getting this far feels to the players? I mean, you got to the actual top 16. We're about that stage here, but this is still the online portion. They haven't gotten to the offlines. What does it take to get to that next step to be able to go all the way to the offline regionals?
Well, it's a lot of focus and a lot of practice that comes into it, and at the end of the day, just calming your nerves and making sure you're playing to what works best for you. You're not always going to be 100%. Not everyone's style is going to be exactly the same. Play to your strengths. Try to minimize your weaknesses, and make sure you're not getting too fancy. Do what got you here, and that's usually consistent, solid play.
I think the fancy plays are what really gets people sometimes, because like you said, you practice so many times, and all of a sudden, this one scenario of this weird line that you could take. You explore that option mentally, and you're like, maybe I should try it, and then you just mess it up, and you're throwing yourself off. You're basically outplaying yourself, right? Basically, like, well, I instead of playing my normal strategy, I end up kind of making a fool of myself. That might happen.
Yeah, I mean, imagine a chess player just all of a sudden taking lines that he's never practiced before.
Sure.
Bound to end ugly.
It usually does, but we'll see. I mean, I think both players have been actually sticking to their strategy, and we'll talk more about that in a second. Before we go too far into it, we do want to thank Amazon App Store, who's giving us a promotion for card backs discounts. The way you do it is you get Amazon coins and use those coins to get card packs, and you get some of that money back. And you can save about 20%, I believe, this weekend. So go ahead and check it out, Amazon.com/Hearthstone.
Yeah, great tool to use if you're looking to fill out your collection. Maybe get a little bit more competitive, or maybe you've been hesitant to just pick up some TGT stuff. If you want to play like the pros, now's a great opportunity to get those cards.
Sure, and some people have actually been able to still do some free-to-play stuff. I know Trump, for example, is really exploring Priest as an option. Maybe as you open some TGT packs, you can utilize them to help you in the run. So you don't need all the cards even to be very successful. You just need a portion of it based off your play style and your preference.
Yeah, it doesn't take every tool to build a house, just the right ones.
Absolutely. That's a very eloquent way to put it. So let's talk about a match coming up here, Nias versus Muzzy. One thing that caught my attention was Nias doesn't play Warrior here.
Yeah, that was actually really an interesting point to me, and one of the reasons why it was sticking out to me so much is that there are a couple. I feel like there's two real schools of thought when you're building your lineup, which is number one, I'm going to be the Grim Patron Warrior guy. Number two, I want to beat the Grim Patron Warrior guys, which oftentimes means not being the Grim Patron Warrior guy. And so he's chosen the second camp while Muzzy's in the first one, and so that's really an interesting point and really what's being the dynamic between these two.
He's one of the last few. I mean, you saw players take that route, Fibonacci being one of them, for example, and he didn't fare exactly the best. Can Nias be one of those people to defy all the odds? People always talk about single deck formats, and they talk about like how things naturally counter each other. And he was like, well, if everyone's bringing Patron, for example, the guy that brings a deck that beats Patron should have a deck that could do very well.
Yeah.
And we didn't see that much, but now he is one of those guys who's getting pretty far.
Yeah, his lineup actually strikes me as one of the better ones for it. Handlock will oftentimes perform very well versus Grim Patron. We've been seeing the new Druid builds kind of struggle against it. He seems like he's in the camp where he feels like it does pretty well. But Priest at times can be a major hurt for that deck. I'm not really sure exactly what the breaking point is, but we've been seeing Patron have a lot of trouble with Priest a lot of different times and a lot of different points too, just a lot of board clears.
That's right, and we'll see how that actually interacts with the lineups, because when you throw Handlock into the mix, that is a matchup that Priest tends to struggle with. So, in a way, Muzzy opening up Warlock here is a very safe option. He feels like he can catch everything. At worst, he faces the Druid, but in this scenario, it's a Demon Handlock Mirror.
Yeah, an excellent Handlock player, Muzzy, I have to say. Definitely one of his bread and butter classes. Nias, on the other hand, looking at his lineup, it really strikes me as he's a guy who is a control player. Someone who's willing to not bring those combo decks and then also bring Priest and bring Handlock to the table. Very confident in his late game decision making. We're going to see if he can do it versus one of the best ones out there, though.
Already some differences in how we see some of the hands looking like they're panning out. Having that Void Caller and Twilight Drake as options are very good. How good is it to be able to put Jiraxis out early if you're going for that Void Walker as opposed to the Twilight Drake, which is a more stable body?
Well, that's a peculiar card in this matchup because You know, at times, the ability just to make the 6/6 every turn when it gets very deep into the game is an unbeatable mechanic. But in a situation like this, you know, it getting out early enough could just present enough board pressure to your opponent that maybe you can overwhelm them at a certain point. Now, that being said, the damage dealt to the face isn't really the important measure there. So having a 315 body that's going to stick around, much more meant to fight minions, not so much fight the face.
Well, Nias is in a very awkward spot. It's on turn 4, even has coin, and yet he has no access to a powerful play on the board. He's got, at best, Doomguard.
Yeah, and this is a pretty rare circumstance you actually see from this build. You know, between Mountain Giant, Twilight Drake, and Voidcaller, very often you're going to have a play one way or the other. He's actually going to choose to free up a spot in his hand, life tap, and evaluate afterwards. This is kind of dangerous, but honestly, I don't necessarily think this is a bad play. I think he's got too many valuable cards in his hand to risk with that Doomguard. And in the meantime, maybe he can still pick up one of those powerful 4-drops, have an okay turn 5.
And it is an interesting thing to witness how the matchup unfolds when people are afraid to attack your opponent because of Molten Giant. So even though you do have the board threat, maybe Muzzy will take that line of being very safe and slow, maybe not attack, and give Nias some time to build up the board.
And we see it right away. Muzzy has taken the very defensive stance, wants Nias to be as far away from Molten Giants as possible for a very long time. He feels very comfortable fighting an extremely long-term, grindy battle.
So then, the person that's usually advantaged in these long-term battles is not only the person that can be able to seize the board and ultimately posture themselves, but the people who can manage their resources very effectively. You get the ability to swing the opponent's board with big Shadow Flames or big Game Hunters, or you have just more resources to out-attrition them, and then be able to corner them effectively when they're at that breaking point. You can kill them.
Yeah, Muzzy, you know, taking that stance of being very, very deliberate in not attacking your opponent, I feel like there is a risk to reward versus it. You know, I feel like when Nias misses his 4-drop, maybe Muzzy is missing an opportunity to get a little bit more aggressive here. But at the same time, this also will give him plenty of time to fortify his board position and provide real threats to any significant things that Nias could play.
It's an interesting train of thought, too, because if you think about it, it's like, well, if he doesn't have something to play on turn 4, he must have other cards that are better in different scenarios. And because that's like he's missing 6 of his cards, so he must have like Molten Giants. Like, should I be attacking into it very aggressively?
Yeah, and that's the thing that I'm really looking at. You know, Muzzy does have a big Game Hunter in his hand. He does have an Iron Beak, 2 Iron Beak Owls at this point. You know, maybe getting aggressive here just is a better option for him.
He does. He does have 2 Owls. You're right. So he can get past.
So I mean, that's a lot of push potential, and I think he kind of still wants to get a little bit more information before he pulls the trigger on this one. Pushing 3 damage sets Nias in a spot where now Muzzy has an option to go aggressive next turn still, but doesn't, again, very apprehensive with this. He still feels like even if it goes late, he's going to have a big advantage. But with Nias hitting the first Emperor Thaurissan and Muzzy having not pushed a lot of this damage, suddenly this position looks a lot scarier if you're in Muzzy's shoes.
A lot of cards have just been reduced. Muzzy does have a play on the board with big swings, including things like playing Dr. Boom, summoning out demons. But which is the best here? Just to kind of evaluate.
It's a tough spot for him. You know, at this point, Muzzy's still... Now it's just kind of more difficult for him to decide whether or not he wants to get aggressive or make the defensive stance. Because the first thing he's killing is Emperor Thaurissan. Not a significant body. Really, the effect from that one is the bigger one. So if he's going with his Dr. Boom, I'd venture to say we're about to see a big push from him.
Yeah, I'm trying to calculate how much he can do in the following damage. And he does have a 2-turn lethal setup, assuming his opponent doesn't have Shadow Flame. But that is a little optimistic, considering that his opponent just had an Emperor Thaurissan on a full hand, practically.
Yeah.
So it's like he should be able to respond. You don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, if he kills this Emperor Thaurissan here and pushes 4 damage, Nias is actually going to be 1 mana short of being able to play something significant in Shadow Flame. Still doesn't push though, so 7, 8, 9. Looks like 17 points of damage. I'm sorry, 16 points of damage from Muzzy's side of the board. So with that Dark Bomb, it actually does have lethal next turn, and this is a little bit hidden, and I'm curious if Nias is really catching on to it at this point, given that Muzzy has played it so slow the entire game.
It doesn't feel that hidden because you know the potency of Boombots. So if you had a Hellfire, you have to calculate somewhere of 6 to 7 damage because it's like, well, those Boombots will at least do 2 to 3 bare minimum, and it's like, you know, realistically, maybe even 8 or 9.
Yeah.
With that Hellfire in combination, because 5 is the average damage of the Boombots.
Now this is an interaction I'm going to be very interested in, is if he Hellfires and the Boombots hit the Voidcaller and hit the face, and take him near 0, but Mal'Ganis gets spawned from the Void Caller.
Yeah, what's the interaction
Wow,
there?
that's a good question, Fred.
I would assume that because the Hellfire, the Death Rattle's trigger, it would summon out Mal'Ganis, and then because it was played before the Void Caller, it would hit the face first, killing him. So if Mal'Ganis gets put out and you're below 0 health, you die.
Yeah.
However, I think if the opposite happened, then you'd live.
Yeah, I think Muzzy actually might have this locked up with the Ironbeak Owl. He can ensure no shenanigans happen. So with Hellfire, with Dark Bomb, there's the Dark Bomb first.
Right, and you can Mortal Coil preemptively, and then silence. Oh no, can you? Yeah, you can.
Well,
no, you can't.
he knows something about the interaction that we don't know, apparently.
Well, his boombots hit first before whatever gets summoned out.
Oh, that's absolutely right. So there's
Exactly.
the damage. It's going to be Doomguard either way, and that's going to do it. Muzzy, very patient and very deliberate, very calculated, and wow, what a game one he takes.
Yeah.
That one did not feel like it was, it felt very one-sided to me,
It did.
not only in the play, but also in the draw.
I think you can kind of look at it as we saw a battle of ramp, and ultimately one person hit the ramp and a person didn't. When you life tap, instead of life tapping, or instead of gaining mana crystals like Wild Growth or Innervate, you're gaining effective mana by tapping, so that way you can get more powerful minions, whether through Mountain Giant or Twilight Drakes, or even being able to have something paired with the Void Caller. In this case, we saw one person hit that in a very powerful curve, 2 Twilight Drakes, into being able to get a lot of threats lined up into Dr. Boom, versus one person had to Hellfire on an empty board, coin tap into Dark Bomb on a Drake that was a 4/9. Those are not the plays that you want to make, and it's very easy to see how Muzzy was able to run away with the game.
Yeah, now that being said, I think from Nias' perspective, a little bit to be taken away from this is I feel like that Muzzy's Warlock is going to be the best performing deck of his 3 in this lineup. So that's kind of a game that I would often expect to lose. So now he is looking at needing to win 3 versus needing to win 2, but I think his toughest matchups out of the way.
That's right. I mean, at least he dodged the Druid. The Druid still is able to nab a win, but that's really painful for Nias because you could tell that his Druid wanted to hit that handlock, be able to maybe snag that win. So he doesn't have to worry about Druid versus Druid or even Druid versus Patron. Now the road is going to be a little bit rockier for Nias, and he's going to have to climb back. I don't even mind staying on the handlock here, but I can understand that Muzzy will probably queue up the Druid, so you have to be very cautious.
Yeah, he is going to stay with the handlock, and this is something we see a lot of times from players in Conquest is when they lose with a deck, game number 1, they'll just stay with it. And this was a pattern that was pointed out to me by Firebat, and it seems to be true pretty darn close to 90% of the time.
I think it's one of those scenarios where when you're put under pressure, a lot of times people revert back to what they know.
Yeah.
And you also just played that deck, so you're in that mindset of being able to think optimally for that. One of the difficulties is that if you're playing very different kinds of styles, wow, double Innervate Thorson. But that's also a very dangerous hand, too, because you might not draw anything significant afterwards.
Yeah, you still got a 5/5. You were saying, you were just talking about players reverting to the styles when their backs are against their wall. Well, you didn't,
Oh, you want me to continue that?
Yeah, that was a good
like,
point.
I thought you were just pointing that out. I was like, yeah, that's right, I did.
No, that was a good point that you were going with.
And so some people, they're like, if they're playing handlock, they get a little frustrated, like, I could play this again. I definitely can win. And you know what? It's not even that bad. I'm just going to queue up again. And then Muzzy can take advantage of that psychologically, queue up the Druid, and get a good matchup.
Yeah, this is really showing you the importance of making sure you keep your cool and doing what you've been doing to get to this point. Maybe Nias has just been jamming a bunch of handlock and really getting the better people to win these games. That's a total possibility. But against another great player like Muzzy, you know that he's thinking about that sort of thing. You know that it's in the forefront of his mind. This might be the kind of time to mix it up. So
Muzzy had the opportunity to go for that double Innervate Thorus, and it's a very juicy, very appealing play. What's wrong with this play?
Well, this is what's sort of interesting to me is what else is he going to do with these Innervates when this game keeps going? Sure, Thorson does not provide him a lot of activated effect, but it is still a 5/5 body.
Yeah. It's attacking the face.
Yeah, but that may be not his game plan. I mean, we just saw last game him be extremely patient with his damage and get to more of a critical mass than kind of putting a ton of pressure on Nias and forcing him to have the right cards to handle it.
Sure.
He just wanted an overwhelming position. So maybe that's something he's looking for this game as well.
It's very challenging because you can even already use hindsight to sort of justify Muzzy's play. He drew Force of Nature and Wrath. Those are things that not necessarily develop the board at all. There's just more ways to control the state of the board or do damage. It would have taken 3 more draws, and by then Emperor Thorson might have dropped. He would have used his Innervates, maybe not have gotten as much value. I can definitely understand why he went for this line, and I actually agree with it.
Yeah, I think it is better in hindsight as well. There is a percentage of his draws that do not pan out very well. When he draws his utility, Thorson looks a lot worse. When he draws his minions, Thorson looks a lot better. But now in this spot, Mountain Giant kind of contested by this Emperor Thorson. Muzzy liked to get 2 triggers. There was almost no opportunity for Nias to take care of this. And 2 triggers of Emperor Thorson, that is a very dangerous spot to be in.
Yeah, you get 0 mana rats. You get combos for potentially 5 mana. It's a very scary place to be in. That's another really big opportunity. You draw 2 cards of the Ancient of Lore, and you get to reduce them both. You might pick up the combo, and you might be able to combo next turn because the Savage Roar and the Force Nature would come behind for 6 mana.
Yeah, this has now suddenly become a very dangerous spot for Nias. And this is, once again, Muzzy's patience really paying off for him in the long run. He's got so many ways to start fighting against what Nias is going to bring towards him, and he's got all the ramp in the world.
Well, he's got the important ramp that he's already hit. I mean, he doesn't have those mana crystals permanently, but he got them for be able to make big, powerful plays, and now he can pretty much play anything next turn. Now, Nias, on the other hand, he does have some things available to him. You know, he still has that Mountain Giant, for example, and he does have, like, Mal'Ganis with the Void Caller. Very good, powerful synergies. The only question is, can he make sure to stabilize and turn it around? Because once Druid does hit a wall that you can't pass, the game becomes laughably one-sided.
Yeah, this game is very likely to become laughably one-sided this turn. Muzzy has got some fantastic plays.
That
what's
is
happening.
Almost lethal, like, because the fact you can Wrath for 3, but it's just a little bit off. It's 4 points off.
Yeah,
but it's scary.
Muzzy, of course, doesn't know exactly what's in Nias' hand. He's going to get some good news when he sees Mal'Ganis come out of this Void Color, though. Muzzy just all the right tools to make sure that this game stays on his side of the board.
Yeah, so you can shut down Void Caller, play another minion as well.
Wow, is he actually going to take the damage here?
With the Savage Combatant?
That would be really interesting. I mean, I think 8 is a bit much, maybe. It's looking like, this is a tough spot. He's actually going to favor silencing this Void Caller, which, given that he has the Big Game Hunter in his hand, is a little bit surprising to me.
Well, I think it's not even necessarily about the Mal'Ganis, but it's also, what if it's Jirax's? What if it's the Doomguard that I saw in the previous game? There's a lot of opportunities where that would be a very difficult thing to impact on the board because you can't remove those high health minions so easily.
Yeah, that's a very excellent point. I mean, Muzzy thinking about the range of options here, not necessarily just worst case scenario.
Shadow Flame, that's such a big sweep on the board.
Yeah, that Ancient Watcher draw is so important for Nias right now, and maybe a bit of recovery potential, but Muzzy not really slowing down anytime soon. He's got a couple more minions this turn.
Yep, and the most important thing is he still can hit this this Force of Nature and Savage Roar pre-turn 9, and Nias always has to account for that, but sometimes you just rationally think, okay, well, they just have to have it.
Yeah, 24 points of damage available for Muzzy if Nias doesn't do anything about this board position. And right now, Antique Healbot's really the only thing he can do unless he wants to jam a Doomguard on the table, which I don't think that's on the menu right now.
Not really, considering that your hand is almost paramount for you to survive with the Defender of Argus, even Mal'Ganis itself. And Twilight Drake is dead because he has enough damage right now just to kill him.
Yeah, I mean, players have to take risks at some point in the game. And with 3 cards in hand, in Muzzy's hand, this is probably the best turn to do it.
Quick 2-0.
Every single time that Muzzy gets another draw, it's just that much more likely that he's going to have Force Nature Savage Roar. Why not go for it now and try to stabilize later? But ends up getting punished for it. Muzzy 2-0 in this series, looking fantastic so far.
In like 10 minutes, too. It's a very quick series overall. And there's something to be said about 2-0 and you're down mentally, but to have that quick of a deficit for Nias is very hard to overcome. It's just one of those things where, like, wow, he just, had perfect hands, so to speak. I mean, obviously you can always feel that way, and it might even be that case. But in a lot of scenarios, you have to look at Nias and just be like, well, he also got a matchup that he wanted, right? The Druid into the handlock. I could have definitely done something else to try to control it. But at the same time, one thing that ultimately is core to Nias' strategy is the Patron is still up. So if this is what he wants to bring, a lineup that's good against the Patron, this is ultimately where he needs to shine.
That's what it really feels like it boils down to for me. Just because Nias is down 2 games doesn't mean he's out of this one just yet. And again, his lineup feels like it's really built to target this kind of deck.
Yep.
Really, the Druid versus the Patron Warrior is the matchup to me that feels like it's the one in question. The other two, I think he's pretty darn likely to win. So, you look at the series and go, Muzzy's up 2-0. He's got this one in the bag. Not quite over just yet. I think it's going to be a little bit harder than maybe Muzzy anticipates.
However, you're giving 3 chances for Patron to be able to get an unstoppable hand. It is one of those decks where, at its peak performance, Patron is nigh unbeatable.
Yeah, and that's the downside of having a lineup like this, is that when you find yourself in this situation, sometimes those decks can just win, and that's part of what makes them so powerful, is that they do have those draws where today the gods have just decided you're going to be the victorious one.
The gods.
You know which gods I'm talking about.
I thought we were, I thought we were the one in control of our own fates, Admirable.
At times, yes. Here's what I think: you can create your own opportunities.
Gotcha.
But you let fate have to, sometimes play its hand in those opportunities.
Do you have a specific ritual or superstition you do before you need something really big, like a rag shot or an unstable portal?
Well, typically
You don't?
you know what?
All right. I'll give you a tip. I'll give you a tip. If you're playing on the iPad with rag, you have to click on your target 8 times.
8 times.
Because that's it does 8 damage. Just tap it 8 times, and then rag will hit it.
Frodan promised me, and if it doesn't work, I'm going to blame
I'll
him
show
for
you
my
after
next
this game.
loss.
I'll show you after this game. I still haven't figured out the perfect draw ritual dance yet, but Ragnaros I've got it figured out. It was so easy.
See, for me, the draws is all about just believing that you're going to hit it.
Oh, come on. We're not a 20th century anime here.
No,
just believing into the cards
I'm
that you'll
serious.
draw.
Better players draw better cards. If you believe you're a better player, you will draw better cards. I guarantee you.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
you just want it and it manifests itself. All right.
It's
well,
power of positive thought.
Nias will want to really make sure that he can manifest his big threats. He has his Twilight Drake, but he's going to want more than that because usually you can deal with the first couple of threats. The reason why Handlock feels like it's really good against Patron, one of the few decks, is because you can not only deal with the board threats through AoE, but you can also make big tempo swings that nonstop pressures the Patron to the point where they can't reliably survive.
Yeah, that's really what it's all about, is them just having super powerful threats that are not easily dealt with by Grim Patron. They thrive on being able to take advantage of small tempo-oriented plays where, Deathbite is killing a minion into the spot. Obviously, Twilight Drake's not getting killed anytime soon by this Deathbite. And this presents a big problem for Muzzy. He has to deal with multiples of these. It's not just the first one.
Right, and then so this Drake will absorb, weapon hits, it'll kill off minions, and these are valuable minions that you're going to ultimately need to win the game. However, that said, it's not an unwinnable matchup at all. Muzzy does have Brawl, which is an interesting tech in case the board gets way out of control. He also has the Frothing Berserker and the Warsong Commander already in hand. And one of those opportunities is that you don't need the Wombo combo, right? You don't need the 2 Frothing Berserkers with a Grim Patron that's been reduced by Emperor Thorson with 0 mana Whirlwinds. Sometimes 1 Frothing Berserker is good enough.
Yeah, I mean, you combine enough Whirlwind effects with that guy, you will win games with it. In this spot, a perfect example of exactly why Muzzy, or rather the Grim Patron deck, can struggle. Nias has done almost nothing to take advantage of resources at this point. He just paid some life. Muzzy, on the other hand, he's relying on his draw every single turn. And right here, there's no reload this turn. It's simply whether or not he wants to kill this Twilight Drake and then kind of armor up and pass.
Right. I mean, there is that dynamic as well. Handlock is willing to lower its own life. That's why Frothing Berserker isn't as... That's why you don't have to go for this big combo, because Handlock willingly lowers themselves to the teens.
Right.
That said, you need to continue to draw every turn. He needed something to play, like you said. I wouldn't be upset if he just hero-powered passed, because the Deathbite is paramount to his success with the deck. However, if you also leave that Twilight Drake too long, does too much damage, it might be too late. So you have to be very careful.
And that's the downside, is the repetitive damage that this guy can get. If you're not willing to invest resources, he's going to get out of control.
Right.
And this board position right here is about to get way out of control for Muzzy. Now, what's interesting is that the Brawl here, I'm not sure Nias remembers that Brawl was in this build. Again, when you've practiced so many games versus Grim Patron, that card is not in your mind. This deck has been very refined. It's been very honed in. They almost never have Brawl in this build.
It's true. However, I do feel like it is on Nias' radar, because you have to be able to prepare. You have 1 opponent per day, and so preparation is a factor. And the fact that all games are broadcasted on this channel does give access to each other's information. I would feel that's very sloppy to not prepare for your opponent and not know that there's Brawl into the decks. So I'm going to give Nias the benefit of the doubt and say I think he knows, because I think he's done the research, and I'm sure that he's very aware of what could happen.
Yeah, it could also just be a matter of whether or not he's trying to force Brawl earlier maybe than Muzzy's comfortable doing.
Sure.
Finding that delicate balance is a difficult thing to do, and you can tell, he wants to make sure that he's doing everything he can to give himself the most possible out of it. And Muzzy, meanwhile, picks up a Grim Patron here, but
All right.
still kind of lacking in ways to actually do stuff with Grim Patron and Frothing Berserker.
Yeah, it doesn't have any really cheap whirlwinds. That's one of the things that you want to look at outside of the Death Spite, but that might be enough. I mean, you do have Warsong, Patron, and Frothing for 8 mana, which means on turn 8, there could be some big shenanigans for Lethal Push.
Yeah, and this is going to be one of the big differences right here is how much Nias is willing to commit to this Jiraxxus. You know, instinctively, I see Jiraxxus, Ancient Watcher, and this Defender of Argus happen, but that's the kind of situation where Brawl can really get him out of it.
Yeah.
You know, maybe he's comfortable enough just sitting behind this right now, like he's not actually still going to lose. Maybe he goes with the Emperor Thaurissan, but with this Jiraxxus on board, Defender of Argus looks mighty tempting, but he wants cheaper stuff right now. He says, you know what, 20 life is good enough.
Yeah, I think it's one of those considerations where Emperor Thaurissan also improves his play for the following turns because he can squeeze everything a little bit cheaper. He says it's turn 7, so I still have some breathing room because my opponent can at best play, you know, a couple of Warsong, or a Warsong with a couple of Frothings and do some damage, but he has to have the exact best hand to kill me right now.
Yeah, Muzzy's counting up his damage right now. He is going to be a little bit short this turn, but he's getting awfully close to that tipping point.
Is he, well, based off of the way he's going for it, does he have actually enough damage right now? Because he can use the Cruel Taskmaster into the 4/3 and Suicide into it. That's 3 damage, plus the Whirlwind on 5 minions, so that's 5 damage. So 5, 8. Oh, we can attack this with Frothing Berserker as well. It is possible. This is actually the same amount of damage, but even more.
Yeah, what he's gonna do is he's gonna use this Battle Rage dig to try to find the right cards that he needs. I mean, if he picks up a Whirlwind here, that suddenly that does change the game.
Oh, you're right. Whirlwind is that? I think it might be lethal.
But with animations, you know, is he gonna find all the right stuff in time? And this is really a matter of whether or not he picks up Whirlwind.
Oh wait, Inner Rage? No, that's not enough. It's very close with Inner Rage.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, had another 6 damage available, so would have set Nias down to 1 in that instance. But this is a dangerous spot now. I mean, if Nias had Molten Giants, this would get majorly punished.
Wow, very close. The Molten Giants would have been a big punish, but Muzzy's taking the approach of, you know what, I'm going to be aggressive. This is a bad matchup. I have to take risks in order to make this play happen, or else I might lose the longer the game goes.
Yeah, frankly, I don't disagree with the way that he did this, because with the Battle Rage, you know, an Execute does buy him a little bit extra time, and a Whirlwind can end up just being lethal at the same time. So him taking this risk, I actually think this is a really smart play from him, even though when he fails, it leaves him in this kind of position.
There are multiple ways that Nias can go defensive here. He can AoE this board down. He can also just slowly pick it apart and try to set up a defensive wall. I personally think that the most important thing is to heal high, because you just don't want your opponent to be able to kill you again.
Yeah, a weapon has to be on his mind right now, so it's either going to be taunt or heal. And, you know, maybe Nias isn't feeling that comfortable. I mean, you just saw your opponent invest a lot of damage towards you, but I feel like he's going to be safe most of the time here. And even going to silence this up and then go for Defender of Argus afterwards. So he knows that his pressure is important as well. And now Muzzy's suddenly the one on the back foot, but does have a way out of this.
Brawl.
Yep, with the Brawl.
Brawl could be really big. Yes. I mean, there are ways you can, first of all, like slam and then see if you can value something else, but
yeah, how do you want to manipulate?
Could be something better.
Yeah, you know, obviously the least appealing situation is when the silenced, taunted Ancient Watcher wins this Brawl. But outside of that, I think all these situations look pretty good for him.
Even then, he still has options to do stuff. Unstable Gold to increase his chances to win the Brawl. Fair enough.
Yep.
If it dies, it also happens to kill a minion that does survive, like a 2-1 or a 2-3, and you can slam it down. So the worst case scenario is that Ancient Watcher surviving, but it looks like it's the first guy out. That's okay.
Yeah, I think he's so, you know, not happy about this, but not disappointed with it either. Just going to Interrage it, take care of it.
All right.
Wow, even going to fire your War Axe and just swing in the face.
1 damage off lethal. But that 1 damage might feel like an eternity.
It certainly
because
might.
Mal'Ganis, the Eternal Turtle. Well, you also could just play Heal Bot, but
yeah.
I mean...
With the Void Caller pickup, I actually think that Void Caller Heal Bot might be a better plan. That was a great draw from Nias. Well, you can't life tap, so that's not...
Yeah, that's not a very good option unless you want to play Heal Bot first and then life tap.
I feel like that would be the worst misclick. That would.
Yeah, and I've seen stuff like that before too. The problem with Mal'Ganis is if your opponent has an Execute, you lose. The Antique Heal bot is, well, you go up to 9 health. 6 damage is not hard for them to generate with just one patron copy. So it's you could also die to that. So there's so many ways you could lose. Nias might just go for what he feels like is the best chance. He already showed one execute, and it's unlikely.
He's going for the Mal'Ganis. This also does threaten lethal on the Muzzy side.
That is true.
But that pickup will likely protect him.
Lots of opportunities to draw into the right card here.
Deathbite's not it.
Shield blocking, still get the execute. Just needs to find one way to get past this Mal'Ganis.
Armorsmith, not quite it just yet.
Still could battle rage for it.
This game has kind of been back and forth. Yeah, once the extra draw.
Oh, man.
Inner-Rage does provide him with some interesting spots, though, but Muzzy has to make a decision here. Is this Armorsmith going to be enough to protect him, or does he feel like he has to armor up?
If he doesn't armor up, he's going to be at 12 health. His opponent will just need a single damage spell to kill him.
This is a tough spot for Muzzy. You know, so very close. You know, he says, let's risk it. He thinks Armorsmith's going to be good enough, and Nias just one draw away from ending this.
No, not the Iron Beak Owl. It does help him make sure that the guy in control will gets a Dark Bomb.
We're going to game number 4. Nias takes the aggressive stance with Mal'Ganis, and it pays off in spades. Still alive, still hopes to find himself at the America's Championship.
Yeah, a little smile there from Nias, realizing that, well, that was a really close game, down to 1 HP. And if you always doubt whether or not 1 damage makes the difference, that's a good game to show you. It's like, it does. Yeah. It certainly does.
A very hard-fought game from Muzzy, indeed. You know, this matchup, it's a little bit harder than you would imagine from the Grim Patron side of things. But that's also partly because Nias is doing such an excellent job of balancing his aggression and his defense.
He didn't have the Molten Giants either, right? And that's another big thing where he could have put his huge toss behind Molten Giants and maybe would have been a little bit safer. So a little mix of unfortunate draw sequences led to Nias being more uncomfortable than he should have been, but I think he played with the cards that he was dealt with and ultimately took some risks right back at Muzzy. It's like one of those things where Muzzy took very big chances in order to try and win the game, and then Nias took one right back and finally paid off.
Yeah, and it paid off big time. Now he's got Dragon Priest left and Druid to fight off against this Grim Patron Warrior, but just like you said, you know, how many times can Grim Patron Warrior not get one of those amazing miracle-like draws?
I mean, Muzzy did have a decent hand that game, I feel like. He had a lot of tools that he needed. He hit Thorson on a lot of the key cards for combos. He had a Death Spite. He did get some draws. So it wasn't, I would just say it was an average hand for Patron. It wasn't, like, sometimes his Patron just can't do anything because you have, like, all your Whirlwinds and you have, like, no minions. Or sometimes you have all minions but no actual ways to interact with them and you run out of card draw.
Yeah, I think the big difference is that Muzzy didn't hit a gigantic Battle Rage in that matchup, and I feel like that's probably one of the most important cards versus Handlock is you need to be finding both your executes, and that's going to require you to draw a lot of cards.
He did get one good Battle Rage off, but it just whiffed on the time he needed to Whirlwind the most.
Yeah. So Nias likely, I think, to throw back his entire hand. He's in search for ramp. Wants to be getting aggressive and forcing Patron to be the reactive one instead of giving it all the time it wants to build a hand. Muzzy's hand, meanwhile, not too fantastic. No weapons available, and not really an effective way to activate the execute. And meanwhile, Nias' side, that's a Wild Growth and an Innervate.
That's a Savage Combatant on turn 1, potentially.
Yeah, I think you know, Purple really struck a chord with me when he explained to me, when do you ramp and when do you just when do you ramp and when do you use Innervate if you have both of these? And he told me you want to have a threat out on the board so you can start dealing damage and then use that time to ramp up when your opponent's having to answer your threat. And so seeing Nias do this, love to see it because this means he's going to be applying pressure or occupying Muzzy's resources, which gives him the time to ramp.
That's right. So he can Wild Growth into what potentially is a couple draws in order to potentially get a 4-mana minion as well. Muzzy, in the meantime, sure, he could deal with the Savage Combatant. It's all about weighing how much risk versus reward, about letting it live.
Yeah, I think at this point probably is going to want to deal with it. That represents just a bit too much damage for him to deal with. And it's not the worst case scenario. Still a 2-for-2 for Muzzy. You know, obviously would love to get more utility out of that Whirlwind, but I think that protecting yourself at the end of the day is probably a more important goal.
Yeah, I think so. One of the ways you can lose this matchup is too much pressure. And Muzzy recognizes that immediately, deals with it. And now the game has slowed down pretty significantly.
Yeah, this is one of those stages of the game where Druid really doesn't want to be missing these drops. Acidic Swamp Ooze, interesting draw. you know, I don't have a problem playing it right here, but I can tell you he's going to want to have his sight sets and some value with that card. But definitely is considering playing it, understands that he does have to get some damage in. Going to be a little bit more patient, though.
Right, but at the same time, Muzzy loves having this slow game because it gives him time to acquire all the pieces necessary to be able to answer the Druid and bring into the late game with a lot of options.
Yeah, there's a certain point where Grim Patron just puts together so many different combinations of cards that you are not going to live through when it has to throw at you.
Sure, sure. Muzzy, you know, just evaluating, taking some time. If you armor up immediately, your opponent knows that you have no cards to play, versus if you just take 10 seconds, maybe you could hesitate and think.
Yeah, I think a sigh of relief here for Nias to draw a reasonable threat. But
Sure.
Muzzy, Fiery Warx right on time, that is going to help answer this. But now this is almost what Nias wants, is for weapons to be hitting.
Sure. I think the most important thing is the second Death Bite, because you can always hit the first one, but as long as you be able to keep disabling them and you hit the second Death Bite, they're in big trouble.
Yeah. So Murloc,
Tide Hunter.
is that what it's called? Tide Hunter?
Tide Hunter.
I always forget the name of that one. Wow, and a Savage Combatant picked up.
Number 2.
Yeah, this is a big turn for Nias. He does have to think about implications of Brawl, though. It is something that always needs to be on his mind. But, you know, I would say at this point, he's got to feel comfortable extending. Still has a 33% chance for the Brawl to end wonderfully for him. And if there is no Brawl or no answers on Muzzy's side, he's going to run away with this game.
He does have a second Execute. However, right now, Muzzy might even opt for just card draw. He just drew his Acolyte of Pain. He could use the Inner Rage, see what he picks up. Might even get Whirlwind number 2. He can use that plus Execute. He can use that in Battle Rage. It depends on what ends up coming out here sequentially.
Yeah, I think vital for him to be picking up more options at this stage. Just really nothing going for him. And the damage on Nias' side is really mounting.
Big draw.
Yeah, I think this may have been a turning point for Nias. This is really in his favor now. He's got combo in hand. He's got plenty of damage on board. He's got a Harrison Jones and Muzzy. No Emperor, no Warsong, no Frothing.
Did Muzzy take too long to get anything useful here? Slam does allow him to activate the Execute and kill off a minion, so he can start to control the state of the board. Slam Execute into the Death Spite seems the most reasonable play, so that way he can set up potential stuff, but I mean, he's used so many of his resources, and the most important resource, his health, is also dwindling very quickly.
Yeah, the first 10 or so points usually you can pay pretty liberally.
Yep.
But at this point, he's going to have to be mindful of it. And this Harrison Jones is going to put so much pressure onto Muzzy that I would say this might be lights out. And actually, with that Innervate draw, that is lights out.
No need for Harrison at all. This game is over. Druid has climbed back, and Muzzy's Patron has been cornered. This is what Nias wanted, and the anti-patron strategy continues to survive.
Yeah, I would say this is the matchup where he's struggling a little bit, but he does have 2 pieces of weapon destruction in here, so you can tell that he's clearly had in mind that Druid oftentimes can be a little bit weaker in this matchup, and now with Priest as his anchor, this is the one that's really in question. I personally am not entirely sold on this. I'm not a big Priest player myself, but a lot of people I've seen put up fantastic results against Grim Patron with Priest, Kalento being one of them. Nias has got Dragon Priest in his lineup.
That's right. I think it's a matchup that is something that you have to explore from the Priest side. I don't think it's something you can pick up, plug in, and immediately like, yeah, this is really good against Patron. You have to learn exactly the small intricacies of how to build your board. And I think one of the best ways to actually learn how to play this matchup is to learn how to play Patron. Because if you know the amount of damage that they can push out, you know exactly how many minions you have. Am I going to be trading in the Northside Cleric right now? Am I going to be buffing it with Valence Chosen so I can pressure? These are the types of things that you have to really understand both sides to be very effective.
Yeah, being an excellent player isn't just a matter of knowing your own deck. It's a matter of knowing what your opponents are capable of as well. And Grim Patron is one of those decks that kind of in certain situations capable of almost anything if it has the right cards. So, you know, feeling what certain lines of play mean, what kind of information your opponent's giving you, all very valuable when you want to be playing late game strategies, maybe like this Priest.
Right. Know yourself. Know the patron.
Master yourself.
Master
the enemy.
The patron.
Yep, I'm excited to see this matchup. You know, Priest is something we have not seen a ton of in competitive play. And when it gets played, though, oftentimes it does bring a pretty big hurt. In this opening hand, not too shabby from Nias, I'd say.
He really hates Patron. He's got Harrison Jones and everything inside of it. I mean, if there was a card that says Battle Cry, destroy a Grim Patron Warrior, just straight up kill the opponent's Patron, he would play it. 10 out of 10 games. And actually, I would dare say that somewhere along the corner of Nias' wall that's not on the webcam, there's just an entire billboard of red lines crossing between every person who's ever played Patron before. He's got a hit list, you know. He's just going full hitman on everybody that's ever played Patron Warrior.
So
this guy hates it.
It's those big flight maps with all the red lines across the globe.
He's got a bunch of like missing newspaper clips he just cut out over 5 years and just like searching for the man who patroned my wife.
Listen to me. I possess a very particular set of skills.
I need you to come.
Is someone injured?
Northstar Cleric Power Word Shield, pretty darn good start. Twilight Whelp's a little bit lonely at the moment, but there's an Acidic Swamp Ooze.
Dude, I'm telling you, man.
I think Nias has got a great game plan, honestly. You know, you may look at his lineup and question what is going on. This guy's got Priest. He doesn't have Warrior in his lineup. He has a game plan in mind. This is not an accident that he's arrived at these kinds of lists. And 2 charges on a Fiery War Axe and protect his Northstar Cleric.
Not bad.
Yeah, pretty great deal.
Yeah, because before his opponent wanted to slam and he'll use the Fiery War Axe. Mission abort, and Muzzy's going to have to go back to the drawing board. Is it time for him to just shield block and just see he can draw later on? I think the most important thing has been dealt with is that he took a point of damage, so Battle Rage is live.
Yeah, that certainly is a good thing for Muzzy, I would say, at this point. You know, Nias isn't going to come out swinging like super hard here, but does have a really strong set of plays coming up. You know, he's even got Shadow Word Pain for an Acolyte. He's got Harrison for a weapon coming up, and he's got 6 points of damage on board and the potential to draw cards. Muzzy is the one playing defense in this game, but he does not have the right tools to really play defense right now.
Yeah, however, I feel like Nias is playing with the second string. At turn 4 and you're floating 3 mana is very poor, considering that you want to be able to play for board tempo as much as possible. And another thing to consider is that you know, Nias has a lot of reactive cards. Not his first real bomb is Ysera. That's a very long time from now.
Which is really the one thing that he does have going for him. So we're going to
bad.
find out how he wants to handle this situation. I would, Shadow Word Pain on this Acolyte. This has got to be one of the reasons this is in here. And then even able to pick up a card with this Northshire Cleric and running over this Cruel Taskmaster.
Yep. And then I mean, I think drawing cards is also pretty valuable here. But however, you do have to keep in mind, again, your board tempo. Are you being able to pressure enough? 6 damage per turn? That's still 4 or 5 turns away from killing your opponent. That might be too long.
Yeah, which is really, I think, the big point to make is how much time do you actually give Muzzy to find the right cards that he needs. As you kind of scale into the later game, you will get a little bit scarier, but with 2 Holy Novas, Ysera, and Shrinkmeister drawn, doesn't have a lot of opportunities to just add pressure to the board. So we do have a little bit of a race on our hands. Can Muzzy find the right cards, or can Nias actually start to close this out and force him to use his utility soon?
Man, he's just passing. But again, 33 health, 6 damage on board. He's got time.
Yeah, and that's again, that's just the big factor here.
Yeah.
Ooh.
That's one way to speed up the clock a little bit, having the Valence Chosen land on a pretty important minion. The Northshire Cleric is something that's very susceptible to Grim Patron because of the 1 attack. I really like putting it on that too.
Yeah, but at the same time, though, that does make one of the most appealing execute minions that you have ever seen.
Slam into execute. Not Firewire. Deathspite just popped into the hand as well, but you can't fit everything. Deathspite does give you time to set up, though. You don't. Again, the onus is not on you to execute everything immediately. Setting up Deathspite could also be useful as well.
Yeah, tough turn for Muzzy. A lot of different ways to do this. And that's sort of the story of this deck, is that there's always seems to be a lot of different ways to do the things you want to do. And finding the perfect one is the difficult situation. You can always get to that goal, but only one way to get there is really right.
Is Grim Patron the hardest deck that has ever been competitively viable in Hearthstone?
It's a yes and a no. It depends on which way you're looking at. To play it absolutely perfectly, very difficult. But just to be winning games, you know, it's very forgiving. You only have like a threshold that you need to get to, because again, lots of different ways to get to your goal. You don't need them to always be perfect.
All right. Well, Deathspite seems to be the choice here for Muzzy. I agree. I think the Deathspite gives you the most options in the following turn, considering that you can utilize the Whirlwind effect to either control the board or to draw with Battle Rages, etc. However, Nias has the Harrison Jones.
Yeah, and we're going to find out how big of a difference this is. Not only does he get to take out this Deathspite, but he gets to draw 2 cards, one from the Harrison and one from the Northshire Cleric.
That's right.
And does he have enough pressure to start closing this game out? Again, Muzzy, a couple tools to play defense here. You know, which one of these is more valuable than Nias? You can tell you know, it's tough. Would you rather have a 5-4 or a 3-9 right now?
Yeah, I think this is where patron experience is actually really key. One of the things that you have to be mindful of is the more health your minions have, the more damage you're giving to your opponent effectively through whirlwinds. However, you're making it more resilient against things like execute and trades. It's a very, very delicate dynamic and balance.
Second execute for Muzzy. That gives him a lot of opportunities to start staving off his board position, but this is exactly, I think, the situation Nias is trying to create, is force Muzzy to use this utility and then have bigger minions that he can't deal with.
Well, 2 executes. 2 minions that you want to remove because there's just too much pressure. Also, any minion that he plays from this point on, if he plays Armor Smith, will get stolen by Cabal Shadow Priest, which isn't the worst thing in the world either, because it is a low attack minion, and you're not being threatened to be killed. Yeah,
Nias actually in a very interesting position. I'm curious how much he wants to get this Twilight Whelp off of his board. I could potentially see him actually Blackwing Corruptoring this to prevent a bunch of Grim Patron shenanigans from being a big impact.
It's a very good point. Because it's not even the fact that patrons copy, because ultimately they're making 3/1s and you can Holy Nova them. But it's the fact that if he combines that with Throttling Berserker or something else like Battle Rage, and then all of a sudden you shut yourself out because your opponent has way too many cards.
Yeah, lots of different options for Nias.
Is he greedy and wants to draw cards? He was hovering over the Northshire Cleric, and I think that play might be a little greedy. I can understand that it fits the mana curve, but I do like the Blackwing Corruptor play. I also think going aggressive is okay too, considering that you have 2 Holy Novas.
Yeah, I mean, I could see it both ways, honestly. Nias strikes me as a player who's willing to commit to certain kinds of game plans, so I would expect him to be aggressive more often than not, even despite the fact that he likes to play these control decks. But when your opponent's sitting down to 11 after a sequence of plays and you have lethal threatened on board, I say let's put him to the test. Let's make him have the right combinations of cards.
Sure. He does have lethal if his opponent doesn't have more ways to gain armor because he can Holy Nova. I think that the Shrinkmeister also had a chance of coming down there just so you can have more damage, but ultimately I think it's the same because Nias is saying if he has second execute, he removes damage off the board anyways, so I'm just going to protect it.
Also mindful of Brawl.
That's right. The Brawl is also very relevant, because it's in the hand of Muzzy.
Nias is doing an excellent job in this match, I have to say.
It's tough. It's tough to balance everything, right? When you're trying to account for the possibility of removal, but trying to position yourself to be winning the game and the series. Remember, Nias was down 0-2.
Yeah.
And he's about to reverse sweep Patron, a deck that people say is the best deck in the format.
Not only is he about to reverse sweep Patron, but Muzzy, I know, is a very excellent Patron player. And an excellent player just in general with kind of mid-range to late-game strategies. That's really where he shines, is being able to navigate these tough scenarios. We've been seeing him do it all game long, but Nias, the tools that he has, just proving too much for Muzzy. I think he's going for a Brawl here. He's not going to go for Brawl. He's going to go for Execute. But my goodness, is his life total getting very dangerous right now?
Very costly. He's going to execute it and take some damage. He's going to go down to 7 HP.
Wow.
I'm thinking if there's a scenario he can die.
Holy Fire?
Holy Fire, you're right. Dark Cultist is not it. I'm assuming that he's going to want to just play Ysera and go ahead and put the most amount of pressure possible.
Yeah, I actually think I would like to see him trade in this Whelp at this point, but he's going to push that 2 damage.
I agree.
At 7, you know what? That's almost a fourth of his life total.
Oh, he gets the Ysera Awakens. That is such a big deal.
Wait a minute here.
That's
There's
not
no
30.
chance. He
There's
doesn't have
not
the mana to do it. Yeah.
Listen, I know Patron is great, and I know it does wondrous, magical things, but it does not kill from 30 with this little in the hand.
Yeah, I think that Muzzy knows this situation is desperate.
Okay, now the next couple turns we can be talking. If Muzzy feels like he has to brawl here and win the brawl.
How else is he killing that Ysera?
I mean, if he doesn't kill Ysera, he dies.
Yeah.
He's
got to do something. Frodian, I think we just saw Nias reverse sweep Muzzy.
Hold on.
Oh my god.
50-50. Can the 1/1 Armor Smith stand up to the might of Ysera? No.
Not today. Kit Kat Slide indeed.
Get out of my
game.
Do it. Get out of my series.
Wow, Nias completes the reverse sweep versus Muzzy. What a fantastic series for him. Falls down 0-2, and he says, you know what? I'm going to keep my cool. I'm going to keep my composure and show you what this lineup is meant to do to Grim Patrons. What a match.
What a story, too. You can see that Nias immediately showing a sigh of relief and somebody next to him clearly watching. And I saw a baby carriage in the background. Maybe it's some of his either his wife or someone else's significant other, or even his children are supporting him. That's just an awesome story to be able to see Nias come back despite having some pretty awful beats in the very first game. You remember he didn't hit anything in that Warlock versus Warlock, and it just looked like it was a bad omen because Muzzy in game 2 curved out so aggressively and hit that Savage Roar combo to end the game off that Thorson sweep. Very fun series overall, and I'm glad to see that Nias was able to go through. It was a great series, ultimately played by Muzzy, but he got very far. He should be proud of where he is. He'll try again next year.
Yeah, this is kind of a perfect example, too, to show you that no matter what happens, you're never quite out of a series until it's over.
Absolutely.
And with Nias taking out a fairly established professional in this one, those stories seem to be building as well. That's the most exciting part of this year to me, is watching the up-and-comers fight against players who have been in the competitive scene and been doing work in there for quite a while.
That's right. Nias, another player you have to watch out for, but his story is still not done yet. He has to win one more tomorrow, I believe, or maybe 2 more in order to go through. It's going to be quite the gauntlet on day number 9. For now, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to have a Maz versus Alan Dang, the 3rd match of day 8 here in the North American Hearthstone World Championship.